because I had Tourette's and I studied the basal ganglia. She's like, you'll have something useful to contribute to the lab. And I did, because everything I was learning about the basal ganglia, I'm like, this maps, this doesn't map. Oh, but I think it might work like this. I really wanted to do human motor control. And so I just volunteered as a patient for every Tourette's study that section had. And then I networked the hell out of the fellows. At one point in the summer, one of their fellows was really interested in cannabinoids and the basal ganglia and cannabinoids and Tourette's before CBD was a thing. There were a couple of studies of THC. One was extract, one was synthetic. And she was writing up and planning a clinical trial with that. And we were talking. And I basically said, like, I know other people with Tourette's and I don't think it's THC. She's like, why? I'm like, because the effect that it has on ticks for most people, sometimes it's even worse during the really, really intense part of the THC pharmacokinetics. But the tick therapeutic effect lasts for about 4 to 5 days afterwards. And so I went to the literature and I was just like, okay, let's look at the psychopharmacokinetic profiles of other cannabinoids. And then I looked up any localization studies for vanilloid and cannabinoid receptors that have affinity for those that are more on the timeline. And I was like, I think it's CBD that you want to be trying. So I wrote like a 5-page thing. I was cited and had the references to the anatomy studies and the rationale. And I went to the head of that section and just kind of gave it to him. And he's like, well, okay, if you can write the clinical trial protocol and get a source for the drug, I'll hire you next summer to run it. And I was like, okay. So I got the other fellows to give me their clinical trial protocols and I just modeled it after them. At that point, I'd learned enough in college to know how to write scientific literature with citations and such, modeled it after them, tracked down the guy who originally isolated THC in Jerusalem. And he was on the board of a British pharmaceutical that was producing cannabinoids for clinical trials in Canada and in the UK. So I contacted them and I negotiated, I was 19, to get these things initiated. And what it came down to was whether or not President Bush was going to get reelected in 2004. Because if he was, there were going to be political appointees that was going to make getting an IND for cannabinoid just a non-starter at the time. And so the trial didn't wind up happening. But at that point, I got hired. And also at that point, the lab was analyzing the experiments that I had been in. One in particular was an fMRI study. And it was looking for signatures of pre-motor, like pre-tick activity in motor systems. And the way they had designed that experiment was looking at the results. And I was like, I don't think you're isolating tick motor activity here. Why not? My experience in the scanner there was one of two things. I'm either completely suppressing my ticks and dissociating from my body in order to be able to be in the scanner and be still, or I'm experiencing, particularly in this part, increased premonitory urge. And I'm just aware of the need to tick and just thinking about suppressing the tick as that sensation. So I was like, I think that's probably what you're getting here. Try looking at these regions of interest. And then if you want to get premotor activity, design an experiment this way or analyze it this way. And so that insight, I think that was my first publication that I was an author on. It was one of the first papers on premonitory urge anatomy. And while I was in that lab, I designed and ran a couple other studies. So that was a running theme throughout my undergraduate and graduate research career. I had that lived experience.